Welcome to the BX Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Fowler, and we have another exceptional guest to share their insights and area of expertise with you on the show. Now, just before we jump into the episode, make sure you tap that follow or subscribe button on your favorite podcast app to get more BX Podcast episodes right there in your pocket. Now, if you would like to find out more about BX and attend a meeting either in person or online, head over to bxnetworking.com/locations. That's bxnetworking.com/locations.
Robyn Ratcliff is the founder of Ultimate Outcomes Coaching and Training and has achieved many great things. She is an international award-winning coach, a trainer and speaker with over 25 years as a business owner and corporate coach and trainer. Robyn, welcome to the BX Podcast.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Thank you for having me here.
This is going to be an interesting conversation because you've been doing this for a very long time, so you know this topic very well. And for the people listening, if you've read the title of this episode, then you'll have an idea of what it is. But disc profiles are an enormous thing and provide enormous value that I don't think everybody fully understands. So we're going to explore a lot of that today. We'll understand a lot more about it. But before we get into any of that, Robyn, what were your first stepping stones of getting into business?
Right, okay. So very distant from what I'm doing now, I can assure you that. My first go at business was running the cafe in the local bowling alley, cooking hamburgers, making milkshakes. And I started there just as a bit of a part-time job so that I could work a few shifts at night around my kids and be with my young kids through the day. So it's still a very long time ago. So after I'd been working there for a while, the owner asked me would I take over the lease and run the business. So I knew nothing of business whatsoever. I was just a young mum and didn't have very many skills other than changing nappies and that kind of thing. So I learned very quickly. 9 years later, I was still there and, had done some training in business and that kind of thing. I then tendered for to run the cafes in a couple of local hospitals. I won that tender, so that was another huge learning thing about business. I then went into a catering business, and then after I got sick of all the hands-on work, I thought I want to be a trainer. I'd always wanted to be a teacher, and it didn't happen. So I want to train people. So I went and studied to be a trainer. I ended up worked for a few training companies and things, and then I got a job in franchising. So I worked for one of Australia's biggest franchise companies at the time, in their training department, and I ended up their national training manager. So that was a long way from making milkshakes in the bowling alley. But I also then had the opportunity to also work in area management and work with the franchisees. So that just made me understand business from another side too. So then I went into coaching. I really wanted to understand more. When I was working with the franchise owners, I realized I lacked understanding what was going on inside people's heads. I really didn't understand human behavior, so I had a real interest in that. So I studied a lot of human behavior, mindset, and then I led to owning my own business, which I've done for 15 years.
And where did this disc profiling come from for you? What was your first introduction to disc?
Okay, so I didn't really know anything about disc or what the label was. I knew through studying human behavior that people behaved differently, and I was really interested in that. But it was during my time when I was studying to be a coach and studying all of that disc was offered as a study, a study course to become an accredited disc trainer. So I took that because, rather than choosing some other things. So that's where I first studied disc and learned about it. And because my interest was in corporate teams and, building up coaching in corporate, it was just wonderful. It really made me understand why people behaved the way that they did. Yeah, so
And
it was
with-
actually through my studying coaching.
Okay,
Training.
interesting. And with the original studying and that first time that you were learning about it, and first time, I wouldn't just say learning about it, but the first time really understanding it,
Yes.
when you were going through that process and that education for yourself, what was it like looking back to see that the people that you'd worked with and how their personalities linked into DISC and what it is and how the personalities played out in the workplace?
Oh, look, it was absolutely amazing. Funny in a way, because I can go and say, he's just a big D. That's why he behaved like that. Right? He fits in the big D box. And
we will clarify what D stands for as well, coming up very
shortly. It stands
shortly.
for dominance. I don't know what
Yeah.
you thought it stood for, but it stands for dominance.
For those that don't understand, it stands for dominance.
Well, it made me understand why these maybe CEOs or, really executive suite people, and they have to be like that. They have to have those kind of traits. So it made me understand that. It then made me understand some of the other people that used to drive me nuts and think, like, oh God, they annoy me. And it was because it just at the total opposite end of that. So my family, my own husband, my own kids, I was then straight away able to go, right. But what it really did was taught me how to communicate with these people the best. Instead of thinking that they were just like, I just didn't get them. It's like, okay, but I can still communicate those people. I probably annoy them too because I'm so opposite. So it answered so many things that it was really amazing. But knowing what they were was one thing, but it's how do I communicate with that with that type of behaviour? So it's best for them and best for me.
Because
so
DISC
really
isn't just
great.
about understanding the personality, it's also a tool for effective communication between different styles. Now, I do want you to answer that question in just a second. But first, just clarify for the people who are following along thinking, this sounds great, but what is DISC? We know D is dominance. So what's the ISC stand for?
All right. So DISC is actually not, so there's lots of profiling tools out there. So it's a profiling tool, but DISC profiles expected behavior, right? So it doesn't profile personalities, which is something quite different. So it profiles how you might behave in a certain way, but it's primarily about communication, your communication style, and that's the main thing about DISC. So there is 4 types to it. There's the D, which is the dominance, and those kind of people are, they're really results driven and they're competitive and they're often leaders because they've got to make decisions very quickly and they've got to be able to, not ponder over stuff and that. So they're very results driven. They're very direct. They could often be direct to the point that if you're not a D, a dominant person, or you haven't been put in that part, you can find them rude, right? If you're not there. Then there's the I. Now they're the influencers. They are at the opposite end of the D. So you're right. Okay. So they are the people that like to chat. They're the social people. They're the ones that will organise the morning and afternoon teas in the office. They're really friendly. They're huggy. They care for everybody. If someone's upset, there'll be an I there. And, they're just, but they're very good influencers too. So that's the I. Now then there's the C, which is like compliance. Anyone there that's an accountant, you probably fit into the C. So they're very accurate. They're very cautious, facts and figures people. And they won't make a decision until they have got all the facts in front of them, right? So they're your compliance people. And then there's the people that are the steady people. So they're the very patient ones. If you want something done, give it to a person who's an S because they won't complain about it. They'll just do it. They're very good listeners. and they're just really steady. They don't like change. Let's just keep everything the same. So that's just a very brief, overview of it. So whilst we put people into, slots on the disc circle, most of us have a little bit of everything, but definitely most of us have two dominant parts or behaviours. But the interesting thing about DISC is that sometimes in our roles, we need to... Now, I have probably very zero D in me. But there's been time in my business when I've been managing people or something, I've had to step up and have some D in me. I'm actually an SC, so I'm not much of an I either. However, I am a speaker. So I have to be on stage and I have to be all of those things. But that takes a lot of energy out of me because it's not my natural behaviour, but we can learn these behaviours and we need to learn them. But so the biggest part about it is the understanding.
And from what I've learnt in the past and understand, and I'd love for you to elaborate a bit more on this, is there's kind of our natural style of who we are naturally as a person, but the learned behaviours, the people that we have to be in the workplace, that is an adaptive style. How do those two elements start to interact, and how can people start to visualize them from, an out-of-body perspective almost of how they play out in their everyday life?
Yeah. Okay, so because DISC assessment is behavioural, not like personality, so we can change behaviours, right? So we know that, for example, me, who's likes to more be in the background with the checklist rather than being on stage. Being on stage is a very important part for my role. And it's not that I don't like it. I love it. But it was something that I had to learn. I had to do a lot of work on myself to gain the confidence, whereas a natural I wouldn't need to do all of that. Right? So it had to be a learned behaviour and a lot of mindset stuff to get me to be able to do that. Now, I love it now, but it's quite exhausting for me because it's not natural to me. I have to put a lot of energy into it. Right? Probably the same as somebody who was an I, if they had to sit down and do a whole lot of paperwork or something, they could do it. They could learn the skills and learn how to do what they had to do. And let's face it, in business, we all have to do that kind of stuff. But if that's not something natural to you, it's going to take a lot of energy. You may have to learn new skills. So we always default back to what we are naturally, but in the workplace, we have to learn other skills and that at time and step out of our own little place to be able to, be the person that we need to be. But we will find that it takes energy from it. Yep. And afterwards we will want to, just go back to our own natural little comfort spot.
Yeah, there's times when I have to kind of exert energy because naturally I'm a very high I. I'm something like 90% I.
Wow.
Which sounds about right. So it's a very high I, right?
Yeah, very high.
Yeah.
Have you found it, buddy?
Yes, I am. So that high I, if I have to do something that is an S, which is it's right at the bottom, it's very low, then I usually have to go and have a rest or a sleep or just switch off.
Yes, because you have to use energy that's not, because you're doing something that just doesn't, it's just not naturally you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And whereas that's also why I hired a bookkeeper.
Exactly. So what you're not good at, what you don't love, if you can, you get somebody else, to do it. So quite often I would probably be just as happy staying at home working on my business plan or planning my next 6 months of what I'm going to be doing. That would give me as much enjoyment as going out to a party sometimes.
Yeah.
Which is really weird. But
it can for each personality type, right? That's It's a great way of understanding this from your perspective, someone who is an SC dominant. Yeah. For me, that's someone that's an I or someone else that might be a D and just wants to give those commanding orders. And I think we all know quite a few of those types of people.
And we need them.
Yeah.
Nothing would ever
do.
get done if it was left to people like me, because I wouldn't make the decision, or I just need to do one more check on it before, so we need these people. And this is why it's so good, DISC, to understand, so that we can put teams together. They've got a bit of everything. Because if you've got a whole lot of eyes together, they'd just be partying all the time and nothing would get done.
We're very
Yeah, nothing would get done, but the S's and the C's would be too busy worrying about all the things that could go wrong and putting plans in place and that. So we need the D to come in and say, right, you've got till 4:00 this afternoon to have this done. And we need all of these people. We need the I's to drag the D's out and show them how to have a good time. And yeah,
absolutely. And with this in mind, I'll bring us back to what we started talking about before, which was communication. Because DISC being behaviours, that's a big element of it. But then there's also the communication styles, and often I found this in my own experience, which is the only thing I can speak from, is I clash heads with other personality types because of miscommunications. And can you elaborate on what those conversations look like and how DISC can help in actually supporting that conversation to be productive rather than locking horns?
Absolutely. So the first part of it, communication, DISC is all about communication, right? So that is, communicating with other people. There's a book by Thomas Erickson, and it's called Surrounded by Idiots. I don't know whether, some people may have read this book, and it's all about DISC, because we feel like we're surrounded by idiots because no one gets me, no one understands. Why are they behaving like that? Why won't, so we see it like that. And it's about, he says in the book, it's about how to understand those who cannot be understood, right? I don't get them. And it's because we don't understand the way that they think. As mentioned before, we can think that somebody who's D is rude or arrogant or something, and they're not. It's just like they're to the point, they're direct, got a job to do, got to have it done by a certain time. I haven't got time to stand around and, tell jokes or have fun or something like that. Right?
Yeah.
So there's straight away a communication, particularly with people that are complete opposites. So communication is the biggest problem in any kind of relationship. Now, I work a lot in the corporate, but I'm also a relationship coach. So I would say 90+% of the time, any breakdown in any kind of relationship is communication. Because you said something and I thought you meant this, because that's how that's how I saw it. But no, it was something else. So understanding the way people behave is a big step into communication. But the biggest part is if you understand how to communicate to that person, that's the biggest thing. It's great to know what we are ourselves and to be able to say, like Ryan's and I, you can see that. However, what's important is how do I, as a CS, how do I communicate with Ryan? I could just think that, if I go by the book, he's just an idiot because he just wants to party all the time. No, he's not, So how can I relate to him best? And that is by just letting go of some of my, stiff sort of, and just, have a light-hearted conversation with you. Yeah. And then tack on the end. Now, I really need you to have that report done by the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The other thing that I found, just on that, and I think you'll probably be able to help create a bit more clarity in my mind around this, at least I hope you can, is say you're S, I'm I, we're having a conversation, you've let your guard down, you let kind of the steadiness element go a little bit. there's kind of, this isn't officially DISC, but there's this kind of energetic exchange that happens, and I is usually at fairly high energetic level most of the time that you're able to then kind of feed off, which then boosts your part of it. So can you explain a little bit more about that? Because it's something I've always been curious about.
Okay, so it's like, maybe I would have said before, like I'd probably just as happy to stay at home and say, no, look, I won't go to that party tonight. I'll stay home and do this. But I go to the party because I think I really should. And then I'm mixing with eyes. It rubs off on me and I have a great time. So I experience part of life that I should be experiencing, right? Just like I might rub off on you and say, you know, you might think I really should be a little bit more cautious about making decisions or something like that. So you will learn a behavior from me that you might take on and adapt a little bit. So I have learned to be a really good speaker, and I need to be influencing, and I need to have personality and those kind of things when I'm speaking. And I have that, but I've had to learn that. So I've learned something from the eyes. You know, the eyes will learn something from the S's, and we'll all learn something from the D's that we might be a bit scared of. We'll all learn about leadership and about being direct. And we need a little bit of everything. The most well-rounded person would have 25% of everything, the DISC. They would be the person you want to work with most, because they've got a bit of everything.
They're well balanced in every aspect.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, as you've mentioned already, there's a lot of these personality elements that come into businesses. They come into corporates, you know, big, small, doesn't matter. Everyone's got one of these forms of behavior. What does that then look like in effectively implementing that within a business to create a really cohesive team?
Yeah, okay. I would say awareness to start with, right? So if you've got a group of people that are all aware, so they've been trained and coached in it, and then just a really lighthearted kind of thing about it, you know, sort of like just accepting that we have all got sort of strengths and weaknesses, but we all are who we are and we behave in a certain way. And every one of us fit in somewhere in our role. But if everybody in the team doesn't understand DISC and doesn't learn how to communicate with each and every one of the types, there's going to be conflict, and there's going to be, we're going to see things of teams not working as effectively as they should, because we don't accept and understand that person's behaviour for what they are, and learn how to adapt and communicate with that kind of person. We will learn how to, even in our homes, we learn how to ask a certain type of behaviour something, and then if it's a D, we can ask in a different way. You know, I really need this done or whatever. But if you said that to an I, they would possibly take offence at it. But if you understood, that's just the way they behave, you know. And I probably, they don't like the way that I behave because I'm too fluffy about it all and everything, not as direct. But when we understand that, and we can be really lighthearted about it, like I was before with the big Ds, I've seen that, you know, in training, and that everyone laughs at them, but they just understand, that's the way they are.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
There is no one behaviour that is better or worse than the other. None at all. It's not like, I wish I was born a D because I'd be better at it. No, you can learn those skills. So it's all about awareness and acceptance and appreciation of how we're all different. And but people need to understand this first.
Yeah, I imagine that the learned behaviours come from the awareness, but I imagine that there's probably fairly different stages of awareness. So first being yourself, your role, how people communicate with you, how they, how they might not communicate with you well.
Yeah.
Then the awareness of potentially what the other types are, the behaviors of those. What does that kind of additional level of awareness entail to try and achieve, but then entail to implement for yourself if you want to learn more?
So when you understand it, so the most important thing and the best skill is when you learn how to communicate with that person, right? So if you are dealing with, say, a C who wants to know all the facts and figures, let's talk about it in sales, because this is a really good example here. So if I was a salesman and I was trying to sell you a new car, and I could identify what kind of behavior your buying strategies may have been, I could target all of my spiel or all of my communication to you based on that. So knowing you are an I, you probably, the colour might be important to you, how it feels. You may like a louder coloured car, all the bells and whistles and that kind of thing on it. So I would probably be, showing you all of that, telling you how good it would feel. What are your friends going to think of this when you pull up in that kind of, in that car? So all of those things that are attractive to an I and get you, oh yeah, this is really good. Now to a C, they probably don't care what colour the car is or so much about the bells and whistles. They'll want to know about the fuel economy. They'll want to know about the safety features, and they'll probably want a printed sheet of all of that on it, right? So as a salesperson, if I identified that this person was a C, I would be speaking slower. It would be very facts and figures like, and look at the fuel. I'm not a salesperson, so but look at the fuel economy on this. That is really, really good. Or this safety feature, or that kind of thing. Similar for someone who's steady, you would know with them they're not going to make a decision either of them are probably not going to make a decision very, very quickly. So you don't use pressure, because once you start to use pressure on those people, you're going to lose that sale. So someone who is a D, they want all the information. They want it quickly. They want it effectively. And they probably want to be in and out there in 10 minutes. So you don't waffle on with someone who's a D. So
it's not the time to crack jokes.
No. It's serious. Yeah. I'm on a time frame. It's, I want to buy a new car, and all those things are important to me. Give you the information really, really quickly. So that's how, when we learn to communicate our communication styles, we step out of what our own is and we step in to what the person we are communicating with is.
And with this in mind, I want to ask this as our last question just before we wrap up, because I feel this is going to be valuable. When you're in workplaces, there's people that you resonate with, people that you don't resonate with. Once the team comes together, there's a lot of opportunity, like you've shared, that starts to create connectedness, great communication. They're all very positive things in business and contribute towards a positive culture. What is it then if there's people who refuse to take on those? What effect, what kind of negative implementation would that have within team culture and within the business?
Well, it has a huge impact. It really has a huge impact. And this is why I am really passionate about taking a step before that and knowing who we're employing and knowing who we're putting in what team, because that is really important. We don't want to put a team, we want to put a really well-balanced team together. So we want a bit of everything in the team. So, it comes back to coaching and training that person. And this is why. So first of all, I suggest, if we go right back to recruitment, DISC is brilliant in that, because you know who you're getting. You know how they're going to behave, because the assessment is really, really accurate. So you're going to know how they're going to behave. So do you need that in that role, or do you need something else? And so right back there, but again, often we don't know about DISC until we're already in there and we've got this person. So it comes back to training and coaching, just like any other skill or anything in the workplace. Yeah, it's about teaching people about this and pulling out the positives and maybe pointing out how that we've got a goal, we've got an end goal. This is what the team's goal is, and how each person's role is just as important as theirs in that part, because the I's got something that's really important. The D brings something else, as like the S and the C. So it's all about training and coaching.
And there's so much value when all of that starts to come together and
Absolutely.
Really create a positive impact within the business. Now, I would like to ask you to share a little bit more about your business, what it is you do, how people can connect with you, and the services that you offer around this space.
Yeah, okay. So as a DISC, my business is very broad. I do everything from life coaching and hypnotherapy through to training and coaching CEOs. So it's very, very, very broad, but it all comes back to the same thing anyway. People say to me sometimes, "No, you do so many things." No, I don't. I coach people to improve themselves and to improve their life or their business. So I work as a coach. I also work as corporate trainer. So I go into workplaces and train everything from customer service to some social media, and everything in between. So my background is in corporate training. So I do that. But a DISC is, I believe, in corporate coaching. I have coaching programs for emerging leaders and all of that, and they're all really great and wonderful. But DISC, if you understand DISC, and comes from the top, and you can have a culture based around great communication. You're going to keep staff. You're going to have happy people, happy teams, and then that leads to a bigger bottom line, because you're not got this turnover of staff and that. So training around DISC, coaching from CEOs to managers to better lead people. That's what I do, as well as just work with individual business owners to help them grow their businesses. I work a lot on mindset. Mindset is a big part of how I coach, because I believe that what goes on up here is what we get out here.
Yeah.
So, if anybody's interested, I run 2-hour masterclasses on DISC very, very often. And they are really, that just goes a lot deeper into what we've learnt today. So I run them regularly online. So if anybody wants to contact me about that, if you think DISC would help you or your team, yell out and I'll tell you about the masterclasses.
That's great. Thank you. We're going to put a link to your website, a little gift that I think you've got for people as well. We'll put a link to that down below in the show notes.
Yep,
do you want to share a little bit about what that is?
That's a download, isn't it? Of what DISC is all about. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, great. A great free resource that you're sharing with people. So that's much appreciated.
I'm always happy to just chat, even though I'm an S and a C. I do love a chat. I've learnt that skill. So always happy to anyone to have a chat about DISC. Pretty passionate about it.
Well, Robyn, thank you so much for being a guest on the BX podcast. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and thank you for being so open and sharing with everybody listening to this episode of the BX podcast.
Thank you, Ryan. It's been a pleasure.
That wraps it up for today's episode of the BX podcast. You can get more of the show by simply tapping the follow or subscribe button on your favourite podcast app. To join us at a live and in-person or online event, head over to bxnetworking.com/locations. That's bxnetworking.com/locations to find a meeting near you. We look forward to talking to you next time on the BX podcast.